Hello, this is Crosby, and this is my presentation on ceramics, namely IR transparent ceramics. So the research study that I read was titled 3D Printing of Infrared Transparent Ceramics via Material Extrusion. And the scope of this presentation was creating a 3D printable ceramic that has infrared transparent properties while still retaining structural integrity after extrusion. And some of the questions that this research study ran into and provided answers to was how to keep ceramic ink density high while preventing agglomeration. Another one was what temperature is appropriate for pre-sintering and HIP, which is hot isostatic pressing, yet will prevent cracking and porosity. So this slide has a lot of information on it. There's a lot of good and useful information. First, I'll point your attention to the stack of bulleted items on the left side. These things are all the ingredients to this ceramic ink, namely the ceramic powder, 3Y-TZP, a dispersant, CE64, a plasticizer, PEG, this humectant glycerin, a PVA, which is a binder, and the deionized water, which is a solvent. And you can see how all those are used in the top of this helpful graph in that A section. All of it's being added and what process is going through before finally landing at a printable ink. And then you can see how it's being 3D printed using the DIW printer into a dome. They also printed it in discs, and then it shows or it mentions how it's dried and debined and sintered. And I'd like to share one quote from the article that I read, which kind of explains what the use of all these different types of additives is. It says, using deionized water as a solvent, the organic additives are modified 3Y-TZP powder were mixed into homogeneous ceramic ink to achieve suitable rheological behavior. PVA as a binder enhanced the bonding force between ceramic particles to ensure the ceramic body has a certain strength. PEG as a plasticizer softens the prepared ink, making ink more workable and fluid for pouring. And then by adding these two organic additives, a viscoelastic ceramic ink was prepared. And lastly, glycerin is added to the ink to avoid the loss of rheology of the already printed layer due to rapid evaporation of water, thus protecting the lower layer from damaging by the needle. So that kind of explains what all those additives are used for. But what did they test after they created this ink? Well, that is what is shown in the top bulleted list at the top of the slide. They tested electrokinetic properties, shear thickness behavior, viscosity, changes in mass or composition at the different sintering temperatures. They tested porosity and density, and lastly transmittance, because the whole point of this project was to see if they could create an IR transmittant ceramic powder. So that was tested. Key result 1 from this study. Well, they were addressing the question how to prevent agglomeration of ink in the DIW process. And so, as I mentioned before, the CE64 was the dispersant, and they tested multiple weight percentages of this CE64 to see what ranges of pH, or what specifically at what ranges of pH would it have a stable zeta potential. And they found that the 2% weight percent was the best and most stable option. And what I learned from this one is that it's important to test multiple levels of factor to make sure it's the best result. So you can see they do exactly that here. They don't just test 1% and 2%, but they also test 3%. Because if they didn't test 3%, they wouldn't know that maybe 3% is better than 2%. But they can see that, and you can see as well in the graph labeled B, that little red and blue rectangular sections at the bottom show the stable sections, and they can see that after 2%, the stableness decreases. So they know that 2% is in fact the best option. Another result from this study, well, they were asking, can these ceramics meet the same IR transmittance levels of traditionally produced ceramics? And they found that through all their testing, yes, they could. But they needed to include multiple sintering methods in order to get a better and better transmittance. In this graph, you can see how just by 3D printing they had a fine transmittance, but they used cold isostatic pressing to increase that transmittance. And they got around a 71% transmittance for the wavelength that they were requiring. So I just learned through this is that multiple methods might be needed to achieve a result, like they did with the multiple different sintering processes, HIP and CIP. So lastly, in summary, I learned that 3D printing can be very useful and applicable to multiple fields as long as you can overcome those traditional challenges of additive manufacturing, namely like agglomeration in the injector and porosity. All those things are the traditional challenges of 3D printing, but as long as you can overcome those challenges, you can do a lot of things with 3D printing. And lastly, I have no real critique for this paper. I, in fact, found it very useful with the graphs and the figures that it showed. They explained a lot of complicated techniques. So, thank you.